Hey everybody, Eric Dorward here with the Spartan Rocketry Club, continuing to work on our build of the Estes Black Brant XII. Now, uh, since the last video, I finished putting on the epoxy clay, so this part is in pretty good shape. The last thing that we need to do to finish this up, and I've already kind of done a little bit of it, somewhat by accident, is there's one final centering ring, and that I meant to just dry test it, but you can see it's on the interior there. I couldn't get it off after I dry tested it to make sure it fit. Fortunately, it fits. Now, I was supposed to put glue around the outside here, um, but I didn't. So as of right now, there's nothing holding that in place other than friction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my wood glue and I am going to make myself a fillet where the plastic touches the centering ring. And unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be able to show this on frame because I have to hold it upright and I need the glue to drip a certain way. So you're going to have to kind of trust me on this one. Basically, glue bottle goes in there and I'm going to put a ring in. So I'll do that off camera here quickly. This isn't really going to provide a whole lot of strength, honestly, because I am putting wood glue um, up against plastic. But I mean, that was what I was supposed to do anyway. It's just I was supposed to put the glue on first. So I have put glue around it now. As you can see, I'm going to stick my finger in there, which is just about the right size. And I am going to spread that out. Now, I wanted to make sure before I did this entirely that I wasn't going to be messing too much with this because I'll show you here this momentarily once I clean my finger off. The, oh, there's my glue fillet. You can see some of it anyway. There we go. The only other thing that needs to happen here is this thing, the one part of the engine retainer is going to go on like that. And I made sure that I pushed down the centering ring there far enough so this fits the whole way, and so that I made sure that that glue fillet didn't mess with this. So that I'm gonna put this upright, but off camera because I need the workspace to let the glue fillet dry. I am not going to attach this thing until after I do all my painting because I don't want to have to cover it basically. Now, speaking of painting, and I'll bring this back for a moment. I want to paint this part right here because it needs to be silver. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to do that next. So I've already put the plastic primer on here. If you recall, I painted this black some time ago. I'm going to do the silver later, like in between the next steps, because I want this done because it's going to be a pain to cover up later when I have to paint the rest of it. I'm going to do that before I put these fins on, which is the next step in the actual directions. So, that being said, we need to skip around a bit. So, I'm right here. The next step is to put these fins on. I'm going to skip that for the time being. I can do this little bit. I glued these pieces together some time ago in a much earlier video. And I need to get myself one of these launch lugs and glue that on here, like so. This is just kind of eyeballing it. I'm going to put the glue on the wood. Come on now. This glue bottle is almost empty. There we go. All right. I'm going to grab my dowel, spread that out. So this has the epoxy end. This has the glue end, apparently. So I'm going to spread that out. Now, while I'm thinking about this, so this rocket is, if it were up to me, and I mean it is, but if I were designing it, I would want this to have launch rails rather than launch lugs. But unfortunately, because the lowest stage of this is not particularly long compared to the rest of it, it'd actually be fairly difficult to get them on for one thing, but to also have them be enough space so that the launch buttons actually did something. So we'll deal with the fact that this has got a launch lug instead. This is, by the way, a 1/4 inch. It's designed for a 1/4 inch rod, which is a pretty serious rod. But even so, a launch rail would be better because it's less subject to flapping around in the breeze. It's, the rail isn't going anywhere. It is very strong, whereas the rod is not. All right, it looks crooked. So I'm going to just make sure that I have this thing on straight. That is, if there is a challenge to this, I mean, there really shouldn't be, but it is to make sure that this gets on straight because, geez. Seem to be just rotating it slowly, which is not going to help matters. Anyway, if this isn't on straight, then it doesn't have a lot of point, a lot of purpose to it. So that looks pretty good. So I'm going to put that over there and let it dry. All right, continuing on, that'll get attached after we get the next bit done. I'm skipping this part here, putting the retainer in until everything's painted. So I'm on to putting some decorations on the top. The top, I've already done a little bit of this, so you can't see all of this, but this is the entire top section. Remember, we put some clay in this before. The instructions said I was supposed to put this tube like so and mark according to this diagram. Now I've done that, and then I took the lines and I extended them using the door jamb, using that old classic Estes technique. I've extended them most of the way up this final plastic piece as well. Now, I need to make some measurements. There we go. So I got my ruler. I can separate these pieces now because I need to make several separate marks. Now, it says from the top end of it, I need to mark a couple things. I need to mark 3.24 inches, not 3.25, not 3 1/4, but 3.24. That, of course, is just silly. I don't know where 3.24 inches is, so I'm going to measure right here. Actually, I don't want to use that pencil. That pencil's still kind of tacky from when I was using the epoxy clay. I don't need to be touching that stuff. Anyway, 3.25 inches is right about there. And I also need to measure that on the narrow line, which is this pair, and that would be, roll it over a little more, it'd be about there. And I need to measure up 0.4 inches, yes, because we definitely use decimals with inches a lot. I'm going to say that is 11 3/8, because 3/8 would be 3.375, that would round up to 0.4, right? So good enough. I'm going to mark, that's not on the right one. Oops. Yeah, it should be on, no, that's fine. It should be on this one here. All right. Now, I made these marks because there's some decoration pieces that we worked on earlier that are going to go on this. One is this lengthy piece that we had to glue together. Unfortunately, this has been lying in sawdust, so that's fun. So that needs to go on there, and the 4 pieces that I shaped earlier, that I sanded into the particular shape that the instructions wanted. All right, so it says use wood glue. Using wood glue on here will be fine. I don't have any issues with that. Putting the wood glue on the plastic part, that is going to be a little, I don't know. I'm going to have to think about that. So let's at least put these on first. Now, I'm going to add myself my glue here, and I'm going to spread it out with my dowel like usual. And boy, this really is close to being empty. I should probably switch over to the other bottle. Okay, again, don't flood it with glue here, because I'm just going to have to end up taking it off anyway. It doesn't need much. I'm not going to do the glue it twice approach, because this is not going to be, it's not going to need to be strong. It just needs to stick. Okay, so there's my glue. Now this one, these are somewhat staggered. So the one that is to the right of the narrow line is going to go, it says at 11.4. The bottom of it's going to be at 11.4. So that should be right about here. And I'm just going to try to line it up about right. And I've got all these nice lines here to help me make sure that it's aligned pretty well. And that looks good. The other one is going to be staggered a little bit. It's going to go a little bit in front of that. There's a tape ring there to hold that in place. Oh boy, like a lot of glue there. I might not need to add very much to this. Not entirely sure where all that leakage came from, but that's fine. Actually, I'll start setting up faster that way, because it's been drying for a little bit. Alright, so spreading the glue out. Again, if you put a lot of glue on here, this is going to take a while to dry, and you don't need that. Alright, so this one goes at that 3.5 inch line, and it should go, it looks like the front of it is supposed to go at the 3.25 inch line. Although, yeah, I wouldn't entirely bet my life on that. It's not entirely, it's not entirely clear. That's all right. It doesn't really matter unless you are very much concerned about getting the historical accuracy or the scale factor correct on this. So, yeah. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Might make more sense to put it above, but I guess they're not actually very staggered now that I look at it. They look like they're about in line with each other. Well, that's fine. All right, that actually doesn't take a lot of time to set up, fortunately. The other piece, this long bit, this is weird. It's going to start up here where that other mark that we made is. And it's going to go the whole way down, and it's actually going to hang off the side a little bit. Why it's going to hang off the side a little bit, I have no idea, but that's what's supposed to happen, so that's what we're going to do. I'm going to just delete that for the time being. I'm just going to let this sit. I'm going to try to let it sit without rolling, but it really seems to want to roll. Good enough. All right, now this is, there's a lot of wood here, so it should stick pretty well. That shouldn't be a problem. But I also don't need much glue for this to be held in place. And there is a risk here that if I use too much glue, I'll end up warping the wood. Because remember, when you get the glue a little wet, or not the glue, when you get the wood a little wet, it does tend to warp. And we really do not want this fairly thin piece of wood warping. That would be bad. All right, so this, in the past, we've dealt with potential for warping by, like on fins, we paint both sides in very short order. So the wetness of the paint or the primer or whatever I'm using tends to balance itself out. It warps as much in one direction as it does in the other, and that kind of cancels things out. We don't have that luxury here. All right, so I'm going to put the rounded edge up here, and then do my best to make sure I follow that line all the way down to the bottom. That actually seems to have gone pretty well. I'm just going to kind of push it down to make sure that everything is settled as well as it should. While the group glue is still a little wet, I'm going to go look here. I don't see any glue that escaped out the sides of the two bigger pieces, or wider pieces anyway, that I put on, but it definitely has oozed a little bit on the long piece. Not much. So I'm just going to run my finger along it, spread out anything that I happen to see sticking out. And that, I'm pretty pleased with that. The front is lined up, the back is lined up, and it looks pretty straight in the middle. So this, I'm just going to put this over here. I'm going to let it dry out vertically. Now, the part that I've been thinking about, the top part. Yeah. So both of the pieces on this, I haven't measured yet, but they're going to be 4 inches. So, get my pencil again. I'm going to measure 4 inches. It looks like 4 inches, it's going to be the bottom of it. It's going to be pretty close to this bump here. So that'll be something. And I need to do it on the other one too. Only the wide one because I need to extend the narrow lines here that far. I mean, I did it anyway, but there we go. Okay. Taking a look. So it looks like, yeah, it looks like this is going to stick over past that bump a little bit. Now, this is plastic. This is wood. Wood glue doesn't bind too well to plastic. So I've been considering crazy gluing this. And I think that's probably the best bet, but in doing so, I need to be aware that I only get one crack at this. So I need to get it in the right spot on the first try, and I can't wiggle it around, and I also can't get my fingers in it. So I'm actually going to go pretty light on the crazy glue. I'm certainly not going to cover the entire piece of wood. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit on the front here, just kind of brush it thin, and maybe a little bit along the sides. Brush that out, and that should probably be good enough. Now I'm going to hold this carefully at the back where there is no glue. And I'm going to line it up. And I'm going to push it into place. Reasonably good. Now my line is not, it's not as accurate here as it was on the wood because there are a variety of reasons. One is the farther I had to draw it, the less accurate it was going to be. But also there was a bump or something in my door jamb here, but that looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. I like that technique. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put a little bit on the front, spread it out, and some on the sides, and spread that out. And I'm keeping the back clear so I can put my fingers there. I'm going to try to line it up with my mark. Okay. And down it goes. Looks pretty good. Yeah, you definitely only get one crack at this, so you may want to use the wood glue. In fact, you might want to use epoxy because epoxy, you got 5 minutes to fiddle around with it at least. But this is going to hold better, at least than wood glue. Okay, now the instructions say that that's kind of it for attaching these little doodads. At some point, oh yeah, that's an important point to make. I should actually make note of that now. So this part goes back. This part is going to stick together like so. I'm going to, of course, make sure the lines go back together when I glue this, but I am not going to glue it together right now. It says very clearly not to do that because I need to make sure this thing is weighted properly before I glue the whole thing shut. It is entirely possible, and I wouldn't be surprised considering I put extra weight in the back in the mode of that bit of epoxy clay. I'm going to need more nose weight. Otherwise, this won't be stable. All right, so this seems like a reasonable place to leave off. This is basically dry already because it's crazy glue. The other bit needs to dry more by itself. This thing, I hope, is still in line. It looks pretty good, so that's fine. In the intervening time, I'm actually going to take these fins too, and to make my life easier, I'm going to paint them black. before I try to attach them. So I'm going to paint them now, all 4 of them. I am going to paint this transition section silver. This probably needs to dry before I mess with that too much. Oops. And yeah, and then we can continue working. All right, thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video.